Hi, thank you for watching me today. So what I'm going to do is give you an overview of NVivo. So NVivo is a qualitative software that you can use to analyze your qualitative data. As you can see here, these are the topics that I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to give you information about qualitative analysis. I'm going to give you the types of analysis, what coding is all about, and also coding strategies that you should be aware of, and then see how you can choose the one that is appropriate for your study. I'll end this presentation by giving information about NVivo, what you have to know about NVivo, especially if this is your first time of using the software. So what is qualitative analysis? So qualitative analysis is all about data reduction. So what you're doing is that you are going through the data and extracting information that you think is significant to help you to address your research question that you have, and then present that information to your audience. So how do you do that? You start by coding, right? Coding is all about assigning labels to the significant information you have extracted from your data. You also have to think about sorting. So after coding and developing a lot of code, you have to categorize the code to develop themes, right? So the categorization process, we can call it sorting. So you are sorting the codes based on the relationship, grouping them into various clusters. And then at the end of the day, you have themes to help you to address your research question. After having themes, you can go further to find out the connection between the themes, right? So that at the end of the day, you may be able to develop a theory in explaining a phenomenon. So sometimes you don't have to think about the connection between the themes and go into developing theory. When you end up getting themes, you can address your research question. There are situations where you can think about the relationship between the themes, right? If individual themes cannot independently address your research question, you have to think about, is there any connection between the themes that I can also present to help me to adequately address my research question that I have? So you have to think about all these things as you are analyzing the data. So getting the background information about what qualitative analysis is all about is very important before you start using the software. Before I go to the next topic, I just want you to be aware that I have a book called Step-by-Step Guide to Qualitative Data Coding. It's a very good book to give you step-by-step in terms of how to identify your significant information from the data, how to categorize the code that you develop to come up with themes and address your research question that you have. So I give you step-by-step how to do that. So this book is going to be very helpful if qualitative analysis is new to you, or you are thinking about analyzing your qualitative data, this book is going to be very good for you. So let's move on and talk about the types of analysis. In terms of qualitative analysis, we have many types, but the popular ones are thematic analysis. I hope you have heard that before, thematic analysis, and also content analysis. So what is thematic analysis? So thematic analysis is all about generating themes based on what you see in the data. So you may start by identifying significant information, extracting those significant information, and then assigning codes to them and categorize them and develop themes, looking into patterns and other things. It's an inductive process because you generate themes or codes based on what you see in the data. It's quite different from content analysis. Content analysis is all about generating themes first before you go through the data. So you already have themes and codes, and then you go through the data and then connect the significant information that you identified to the existing themes or the one that you have created, right? So that's the main difference. Thematic analysis, you come up with emerging themes, right? You generate themes based on what you see in the data. Content analysis, you already have your themes or what you expect, or you have your codes based on maybe the literature or based on the conceptual or theoretical framework that you have. You have already developed your codes and themes. Then you go through the data and see whether you can identify information that are significant and connect them to the themes or the codes that you have. It's just like having containers, and then you go to the data and then extract information and drop them into the existing containers. That's all about the content analysis. When you are about to analyze your data, you have to think, am I doing content analysis, or am I doing thematic analysis, or I'm doing something different, right? You always have to know before you start the coding process in terms of the type of analysis. The next one that you have to think about is coding. So what is coding? Coding is all about looking for relevant information. And you're going to ask yourself, what is relevant? What information is really relevant? And relevant information is any information that can help you to address your research question that you have. Right? When you're going through the data and you see participant information or participant statement, and you think that it can help you to address your research question, or it can help you to meet the objective of the study or the aim of the study, then that information is significant. So you are looking through the data because the information participants have given you is vast, and you cannot just take all the information and present that information to your participant. You have to go through and extract what is important. So you can decide what is relevant if you already have perception of what you want from the data. And what will help you to know what you want is your research question, or your research objectives, or the aim of the study, or the purpose of the study. That will help you to look into, what do I want from the data? So the coding starts from going through the data and extract what you want and helping you to address your research question. So you extract that, you select that and extract it, right? And then you tag it. Tagging is generating codes or labels and connect it to the significant information, right? So the label can be between 2 to 5 words. It can be a phrase representing the significant information, at the same time helping you to address your research question that you have, right? So you tag it because you have seen something that is significant, and then you come up with, okay, what phrase should I use to represent this significant information and address my research question that I have? So that's all about the coding, right? So there are two main types of coding. There are many types, but I just want to focus on these two, right, to help you to understand. Because when you are doing the coding, you have to know the coding strategies that you are using. It helps you to be consistent with the codes that you are developing if you know the strategy. So the two main strategies are description-focused coding, and also we have interpretation-focused coding. Description-focused coding, you are describing, you are like a journalist going to a place and then reporting what you found. You are describing it, right? So you go through your data, extract significant information, and describe. You use a code to describe that. You are not making any kind of interpretation. You are just trying to present what you see or what is there that help you to best code to represent that kind of information. So you extract relevant information. You have to make sure that you understand that information, and then you target or label that information, and that will be the description focused coding. I will give you some examples concerning that. So when somebody says something, what you are doing is that you are just reporting what the person said to your audience. You are not trying to find out the meaning or the implications or the conclusion or the claim. You are just describing. Right? This is where you have to be very careful about your preconceived ideas and your perception. That's why when you are coding, you have to think about your perception, preconceived ideas, and set them aside. We call it bracketing, right? Set them aside so that they will not have undue influence of what you are coding. Look at the issue with fresh view and put aside all your preconceived ideas. Let the data speak to you. What is the data telling me? And that's the important thing about the description focused coding. There's also interpretation-focused coding. In this case, you extract relevant information and then you interpret it. You make sense of it. Interpretation, you have to also think about who is presenting that information to you, because we believe that the information the participants are giving you is the product of who they are, how they view things, their preconceived ideas, their background information, their beliefs. Everything that they are giving you is influenced by their beliefs. So if you really want to understand, if you really want to interpret what participants are telling you, you have to know who is giving you that information, right? And then based on that, you'll be able to make sense of what the participant is giving you. Normally use interpretation focused coding if the data that you have, you need to make sense of the data before you can use it to address your research question. The connection between the data and your research question is so wide that you have to make sense of that information. Without making sense, just describing it, you will not be able to adequately address your research question that you have. So it's always important for you to make sense. So based on the kind of data that you have, that will help you to decide whether you want to use description focused coding. When the information is so rich and the information participants have given you, or the information that you have can directly address your research question, right? By not trying to interpret or make sense of it or something like that, then description focused coding will be the best. But if you have to process that information before you can address your research question, then this is more of interpretation focused coding, right? Sometimes you may use the two of them. So you just have to decide which one is the best, or if you want to use them and help you to address your research question, that would be awesome if you can do that. And also my book talks a lot about in what situation that can you use interpretation focused coding or description focused coding. Now that we understand what is coding, what is qualitative analysis, different types of qualitative analysis, different types of coding, now let's move on and talk about NVivo. So as I said, NVivo is a qualitative software, right? And it's not free. Let me show you how to get access to the software. You go to Google and then search NVivo, and then you click on this one and it take you to that website and you can buy it. They have student version. You can use it for a year. They have different versions. So you just have to find out which one is best for you based on the cost. And then you can get access to that information. You can use it for free for 14 days too. So that's all about NVivo, how to get access to it. So let's go back to the PowerPoint. Let me give you a big picture about NVivo. So we have inputs, activities, and outputs. So the inputs, think about it this way. You have your transcript or have your open-ended survey responses, or you have your document, or you have your articles, you have your videos, you have your audios, right? You can upload all that information, right? The data that you have into NVivo. So there's a way that you can upload all of them, but you have to prepare the data first, right? Clean up, take out any identifiable information, and then you can make them ready for you to upload it into NVivo. So when you upload the file, you can create cases for them, right? What are cases? They are folders that are assigned for each participant. So let's say when you open that folder, you should have information about the participant. You should have the transcript related to the participant, demographics, course that has been developed, and the themes. So see a case like a file open for each participant. And you also create containers for the research question. Why do you have to create containers for the research questions? You want to develop codes and put them under their respective research questions. As you are going through the data, let's say you have about 3 research questions, right? And you're going through the data and you identify significant information and you develop code. You have to put it under their respective research questions. So having a code or a parent code or a container that you can put codes under will be important. It helps with the organization of the codes so that when you move on to the next stage where you want to categorize, you know the kinds of codes that are under each of the research question that you have. So first you have to create containers or a code or a parent code for each of your research questions. You could also run word frequency and word search. I'll show you how to do it in my second video. So the next one is generating codes under each of the research questions. So this means that you go through the transcript, identify significant information, generate codes, and put them under each of the research questions. After that, you can also come up with themes. So I'll show you all about how to do it. So this is just a big picture to show you what NVivo does. So the next one, you can generate code book. You can generate a list of code in Excel spreadsheet. You can get your word cloud and word tree. I will be showing you all these things. You can also do a lot of visual representations there too. The first stage is to prepare your data. So the data preparation is looking at your transcript. Let's say you have 5 participants. You go through the transcript, you make sure that you take out any identifiable information, and then you can give them labels. So I gave my P1, P2, P3, P4, P5, right? And the file name should be the same as the label that you give to participant, just to help you to know that this file is for participant 1, this file is for participant 2, this file is for participant 3. So the next one is to create a table for demographics. So if you plan to bring the demographic information to NVivo, the best way is to have it on Excel spreadsheet, right? So the first column will be participant ID. The ID should be the same ID you gave to the file, so that when you import all these 2 documents, you import the transcript and import the Excel with demographic information, the system will be able to match the demographic information to participant transcript. So you see here, I have P1, P2, P3, P4, P5. I have their age, gender, and other demographic information, right? So that's all about the data preparation. You have to also think about assigning labels to your research question. Imagine you have 2 research questions. The first one is, what are the causes of burnout among primary healthcare physicians? You see that I've labeled my research question, the first research question, and the burnout causes. So this label is just to remind you that it's for research question 1, right? So the research question 2 is what can be done to reduce burnout among primary healthcare physicians. So you can see this one that I have burnout solution representing the second research question, right? So you assign labels to your research question, and then these labels will help you to create containers or codes when you go to NVivo, so that you can put codes under each of the research questions that you have. The next one is you have to decide whether you are using description focused coding or interpretation focused coding. Based on the data that I have, the information is, I ask participants directly what are the causes of burnout, what are the solutions. So their responses can directly address my research question that I have. So my role here is just to describe what they are telling me, right? So that's why the description focused coding will be the best coding strategy for you to use. So what you have to do, the next step is to upload your files. So you see how when you upload your file, that is how you're going to see. And don't worry about the practical aspects. I'm going to show you. I'm just trying to give you a big picture of what NVivo can do. You see here that I've uploaded all my transcripts, P5, P4, P3, P2, and P1. And also here I have uploaded the classification sheet. That's the demographic data that you create in Excel. You don't have to bring demographic information if you are not going to do any kind of maybe comparing groups based on maybe themes. So if you are not going to compare and contrast participants' demographics with respect to the theme that has been developed, you don't have to bring the demographic information. You just have to bring the transcript and then go through and develop themes or codes to help you to address your research question that you have. So the next step is to start the coding process. But before you start, you have to create containers for the research question. So you remember the labels that I gave to the research question 1, burnout causes. So you see, I've created a container for research question 1. I've created a container for research question 2, the code for both research question 1 and 2. As we see here, you go through your data. So now we are still in NVivo, and this is one transcript. and I've identified something that is significant long hours that can address the first research question. So I've identified relevant information. The next step is to create a code representing this relevant information at the same time helping me to address my research question. So I created a code called having long hours, right? So here under the first research question, because it's about the burnout causes, then I drag and drop the significant information into this container, right? The container which is called having long hours. You see, when I drag and drop, the file now is 1, reference is 1. Before then, the file was 0. This means that it was an empty container. But when I drag and drop, I have 1 here. The file is the participants, right? So if you have 2 files here, this means that 2 participants are connected to this code. If you have 5 files, 5 participants are connected to this code. And the reference is the significant information. So if when you drop significant information into the container, the numbers shows here. So if you drop 2, the reference will be 2. If you drop 5, the numbers will be 5, right? It also is based on the number of significant information you drop into that container, right? You go through the same process, right? You go through your transcript, identify significant information, generate codes, and then drag and drop the significant information into the code, right, that you have. So you can see here that having numerous work-related tasks, we have 2 files. This means that 2 participants are connected to this code, and 4 significant information was dropped into this code, right? So that's how you're going to do it. So the first stage of coding is all about identifying significant information and developing codes under their respective research question and drag the significant information and drop it into that code. So whenever you see a significant information, you first have to look at the existing code and see whether you can drag and drop it into the existing code. If none of the existing code can be used to contain that significant information, then you have to create a new code to represent or to help you to drop that significant information into that. If you are not clear about this one, don't worry. My next video, I'm going to show you step by step how to do that, right? So at the end, you can see that we have under the first research question, we have 5 case counts. So the case count will be the number of participants, right? Case count is the number of participants. So the number of participants that are connected to this research question is 5. And then the number of significant information that are connected to this research question is 14. You can see 14 here, right? Because it added everything up here. And then because all these codes are under this research question, you add everything up and the system does it for you and you get 14. So you can see here that 5 participants are connected to this research question and 14 significant information are connected to this research question. And then you see the breakdown. Burnout solutions, we have 5 and then we have 12, right? So when you add everything up here, you get 12, right? So that's all about the first stage of coding, which is where you generate codes. So after finishing coding, you move on to sorting, right? So sorting is just grouping code based on the shared relationship to help you to form clusters. And then you label those clusters to develop themes. So what you have to do is after developing the codes, you can export the code and then do the sorting outside NVivo. You can do it inside NVivo, but it's much easier if you do it outside, right? So that's why I always advise my client to export the codes into Excel and then start a categorization process or start a sorting process, right? So now I have exported all the codes from NVivo, and then I'm going to start the sorting process. So the sorting process starts by, you do it for each of the research questions. So you create a table, right? You can have about 5 or 4 or 6 clusters, right? So you have 6 columns. And then what you're going to do is that you start with the code under the first research question and just put them into the various classes based on the relationship. You can put having numerous work-related tasks in the first cluster. If you see anything and you look at, okay, having long hours, if it has some relationship with this one, you put it in the first cluster. It's simply looking at the characteristics of each of the codes and see whether you can group them. Why are you doing that? Because at the end of the day, you want to develop themes. So it's all about, making sure that you are grouping codes based on the relationship that they have. You have to be very flexible at this stage, right? You just think about, okay, can I put them together? Do they have something in common? Can I group them together? So based on that, you can put them into 4, 5, or even 6 classes. So the most important thing is that if you are bringing in the code and you realize that it cannot fit cluster 1, 2, or 3, or 4, you create a new cluster and put the code there. You do the same thing. At the end, you may have about 5 or 6. If you have about 10 or 11 or 12, you have to go to the next stage where you have to recategorize the classes again. At the end of the day, you want to come up with about 4 or 5 teams. You don't want to go beyond 6. See here, I do the same thing for the second research question, group them based on their relationship. And the next one is to label your clusters based on what you have here. What label can best represent all the cluster members, the codes here, at the same time address your research question that you have. And then, so at the first cluster, having high workload can represent all this information. Being new to the profession can represent all this information. Putting in extra effort can represent all the information. So you can do the same thing for the second research question, which is trying to come up with a label that represents the codes that you have grouped under each of the classes that you have. So the label for the classes will be the themes. So at the end, we have, for the research question, we have 4 themes, and the research question 2, we have 5 themes. So then you go back to NVivo. And then what you're going to do is that you create containers or codes for the themes. So you see here, I've created code under each of the research questions. I created code, and then I drag and drop all the codes related to the themes, right? And drop them into the themes. So you see here that these codes under these themes, these codes are under these themes. The 4 themes that you have for the research question 1, and then you create the containers for the 4 themes and then drag and drop the codes into the themes. So you see how the codes are under the themes now. So you do the same thing for the research question 2. And then you can also do visual representation, right? So this one is the word cloud. So you can use NVivo to create a word cloud. So the bigger the font, the higher the number of times participants use that word. So you can see here that burnout was used several times. Physicians was used for several times to others. You can also do word tree, right? And I will show you how to do it. So you can see here that you can see the phrases before and after the word burnout, right? So if you want to see how a specific word is used, you can search for that word, and then you can design a word tree to show to your audience how a specific word was used. You can also develop a project map, right? So let's say you are presenting your theme, right? One of the themes is having a high workload, and you want to show the participants that are connected to this theme. So you can see here that the P1, P2, and P5 are connected to this theme, right? You can show the background of the participants, right? So demographic information. So you can see that participant 1 is 37 years, has 12 years work experience, and he's an African American. So you can see that you can present the background information, especially if you want to talk about who are connected to the team and the background of the participants who are connected. This information will be very useful for you. So this is what I have for you concerning NVivo. If you want more information, you can email me. I also provide consultations. I can show you how to do analysis using NVivo. My way of training is I always want you to get the background knowledge about qualitative analysis. because without having a background in knowledge, the software cannot help you because you have to go through and make sense of the data. Imagine you don't know or have the skill in developing code and themes. How will you address your research question? So it's always important for you to get background information about qualitative analysis, how to analyze your qualitative data, what kind of code do you have to use. And this is where my book is very good for you if you get access to it. It will help you to get basic understanding of qualitative analysis. I have a chapter on also how to use NVivo. So this book will be so helpful. So thank you so much for your time. I'm going to show you how to use the software in my second video. Thank you.